Our next speaker will speak on the topic, the future of funding, regulation, and priorities for transportation and infrastructure projects. Please join me in welcoming Josh Robin, co-founder of Cornice Technology, who will show us the way ahead.
Hello. We're going to spend a lot more time looking at the slides than we are at me today. Let's just go right into it. There we go. So today we're going to be talking about the future of funding, regulation, and priorities for transportation and infrastructure projects. This is the first presentation that I've ever done where I haven't had a stiff drink, and I'm not holding a microphone. So if I hold the clicker like a mic, don't hold it against me. But this is a very complicated topic, and we're going to try and make this as simplified and layman as possible, just to try and cover as much information and not go too in depth. But why is it that I'm the guy up here talking to you about this? Very quickly about me. I am a car guy. I've been in the industry for about a decade. I've gone from turning a wrench, working on these hybrid electric vehicles, all the way up to managing departments, do some consulting for fixed ops directors, dealer groups. I've published, also done some work with some renewable, really cool projects. So I've played around in a couple different spheres. The other side of our business, Cornice Technology, is Kyle, who's also in the audience. He's the other side of this. We've got a classically trained civil engineer. He's an expert in EV charging, energy storage, connectivity implementation. We've got this really, really cool kind of blueprint dynamic for our group that gives us kind of this really interesting and novel end-to-end perspective on what's happening in this industry and how everybody's kind of playing in this ecosystem. We like to think of ourselves not really exclusively as a consulting business, but as a group that really helps people identify who they are in this emerging ecosystem and really how we can help them implement what they're trying to do so that they can be successful. Some really fun and cool offshoots of this, I mentioned it yesterday, we've paired with a university. They've got a sister program to their current automotive program that they're looking to combine mechatronics, ECM. There's a turbine facility that we're looking to join with this as well. Education's critical. Every conversation that we're having, we need to have a workforce that knows how to work on these vehicles, service them, that can build these infrastructure projects. So we need to help build that and facilitate that. We're going to do that locally here and ideally blow that out for the rest of the country. The other thing that we're doing, which just happened, is we've been elected to be the online, we're going to be the acting editor for this online and print magazine. It's called Electrons Today. It's going to be released sometime Q3, maybe Q4 this year, but it is what we're discussing. This is the conversation that we're having in this room. That's very important. We need to have intercommunication between our different, little sectors. Everybody is doing stuff that doesn't exist in a vacuum. If you are a charging company that is building chargers and you're putting them in the ground, you have several other companies that you need to be in communication with. So we want to help make sure that everybody has clean, good data. So with that, we're going to dive right into this. Where are we today? Right now, we know we have states adopting policies where they want to have, all the vehicles that are going to be sold in our state after this year are going to be exclusively zero-emission vehicles. We have OEMs that are announcing the same thing. Everybody's kind of going in line with this. Some OEMs are significantly more aggressive than others. Some are kind of pulling back and kind of seeing what's going on. We've got a lot of fleet adoption. That's been, I want to say, what is it, like half the conversations that we're having today? We're talking about fleets. We're talking about transportation. And we have this emerging, growing charging network that's happening. What does this look like tomorrow? So we know that we're looking at vehicle-to-grid adoption. People are going to be charging their vehicles at home. That vehicle is, for better or for worse, you're looking at, it's a mobile battery storage unit. That's something that you can be using to buffer your home. It could be a part of the grid. You're going to have fueling expectations met when you're on the go and you don't have the affordability to charge at home. Filling up your vehicle at a station is going to ideally be as non-disruptive or as irritating as it is today, hopefully not more. We have vehicle-to-X connectivity, where vehicles are going to be talking with each other and they're going to be talking to the ground. There is no infrastructure for this, and we kind of touched on this a little bit yesterday about the actual amounts of data that's necessary to facilitate this. But that's, once again, that's something that we are planning on having. And then we have the conversion of our trucking and our transportation industry here. And what does all this look like? A lot of people like to look at the future and they go pie in the sky. I'm going to get home, my car is going to drop my groceries off, it's going to go drive itself to a charging location. Fantastic. But what this really just translates into is we're going to have an increased electrical throughput and usage. Let's look at actually what that means and what that translates into. So we're going to look at the energy stream here. The users that are using this network, this infrastructure right now, we have our traditional homes, residences, people are connected to this electrical grid, they are running their refrigerators, they're charging their cell phones, they're playing video games, they're running their ACs. And now we're looking at adding level 2, level 1 chargers to this ecosystem. For brick and mortars, retail spaces, once again, we're in the conversation of how can we add chargers to these locations, which is going to, once again, increase the load on this system here. We've got our level 3 dedicated sites, which are going to significantly use more load. You could look at something similar to a subdivision. I mean, it's extensive. Then our trucks. If we switch to hydrogen, that's phenomenal. But if we are in the conversation of switching these to electric, you're looking at another, for lack of a better word, a guzzler in this ecosystem. This is something that's going to create a lot of draw. We have our commercial spaces, your grocery store that does a ton of refrigeration. These are big boys on the block. We have our commercial campuses, which can be a university, it could be an office complex. And then we have our commercial manufacturing. And these are the locations that are doing the work, making our products, everything that we got here. Looking at this side of our infrastructure, most conversations don't really go beyond this. But you've got to start thinking about the rest of this equation. And from those users, in order for them to get those electrons, you've got your local distribution. You've got your substations, you have your transformers, and they're going to take your bulk electrons from your high voltage, and they're going to step them down so that you can use them and not launch yourself out of your house. We've got our transmission, which is the bulk transmission, those high voltage lines that we see that move from our producers all the way down the line. We like to refer to our generation as electron factories. This whole conversation that we're having, the reason why we're here is because we're looking to have a carbon neutral footprint. We want to do good for the environment. We want to have an electrified economy. And that means that we're moving towards solar, wind, we're going towards hydroelectric. Solar's obviously the big boy on the block. But we'll use the word consequences to these decisions that we make. But what's really important is when you're looking at this, once again, is this is an equation. And we are adding to this side of the equation. And there needs to be a conversation on the rest of this side. looking at the microcosm of where we're located in Troy, we have 22 public gas stations. We have 0 level 3 chargers. So if you're looking to fast charge a vehicle, you have to go outside of our city to do that. We have 53 level 2 chargers, but they're all on RPI campus. They're not accessible to the public. So unless you are a student or faculty there, you are not charging a vehicle unless you have a level 2 charger in your home. But what we really need to think about and why this is critical is every single one of those gas stations that is delivering energy in the form of a fossil fuel to a customer. And that needs to be quantified and transferred into an electrical load. That's going to add to our infrastructure, right? So what is that going to do? How do you deliver all this new energy to these specific clients? And we like to kind of break this down in a very simple way as looking at a highway. All of this infrastructure that we have is stuff that's built years ago, thinking about, level of service. How much do I need to put through these roadways? How much do I have to put through these transmission lines? How much can my substation take? And as we add more and more and more to this, you're going to have traffic. We're going to have these blockages. We're going to have these unintended consequences. So we look at this infrastructure, there's suddenly these red flags, these areas that we have to start thinking about more. The only way to really resolve this problem, which I think we're all aware of, is we got to throw money at it. And that's really it. You got to spend money, and you have to invest in this infrastructure. But that takes time. It takes energy, no pun intended. And one of the ways that we can mitigate this is energy storage. Energy storage is a very, very big conversation right now. It's a big conversation because as we move on the grid level to electron factories that are solar and wind, solar, it's great, but you don't get no solar at night. Same thing with wind. Wind, you do not have production if the wind isn't blowing. So you need to have this large storage to offset the lack of consistency in the generation that you're going to be having. Knowing that you are going to have these blockages in your system because we're going to be increasing the load, you're going to want to have energy storage localized on your distribution side. This can be something that your municipality does. This can also be something that you do in your home. So there's so many different levels to this. But let's make things more complicated. When we think about the cost, how many people here look at their electric bill? Like, raise a hand. How many people actually look at their bill? It's a lot more than I thought, right? You've got to pay your supply. You've got to pay your delivery. There's the demand charges, which, as we all know, people come home, it's 5 o'clock, everybody's going to be running their air conditioner in the summer. It's more expensive then than you're running your blow dryer at 3 o'clock in the morning for whatever reason you'd be doing that. We've got our government taxes and fees, administration fees, and all this looks like your total bill. And a lot of this is variable. You and I could have the same home, same square footage, have the same energy footprint, but we could have vastly different bills because of who is in this energy cost extreme. So going back to this battery storage that we are currently integrating, that will continue to be integrated, you can use your energy storage to offset certain costs. So maybe you want to purchase energy at an off-peak time, and then you want to store it and use it as a bank for later. Maybe your grid is producing energy that doesn't sync up, their peak production doesn't sync up with your peak use. And they can use that so that you're not running into these scenarios where you have a gouging uptick in what your bill is. But we also have to look at fueling costs, because this isn't the same conversation. When you are at a charger, you are using these electrons as a fuel source. And you're still paying your supply, and you're still paying your delivery, and you have your admin fees. And if your vehicle's at 15% and you're gonna jack it up to 80%, that's gonna be more expensive than if you're at 60 going up to 80. These are obvious things. But we have this gap that's missing. Right now, it's relatively cheap to charge your vehicle. And one of the main reasons is we don't have, by and large, these variable demand charges. We don't have these government taxes and fees. Some states have no idea what to do with this, and they're saying, well, we'll link a fee to the registration of your vehicle so that we'll at least collect some sort of revenue, because we haven't built that into this ecosystem yet. So the deeper you go into this infrastructure, the more players that we see. And doing a real deep dive on this, I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee here. When we're looking at your charger-specific stack, staying on that conversation, it's not just this gas pump. You've got to think about, if you are somebody who's installing a charger, or if you're somebody that wants to sell a charger, if you're doing anything with a charger, if you are paying at a charger, there's the hardware that typically is one entity. You've got your software that hopefully is the same company, but sometimes it's a different company. There should be an energy storage component, but sometimes there isn't. We highly recommend that you have one. There's the connectivity, which is going to be all that data transfer, and then there's the operation and maintenance side of the site as well. But there's two other elements here. You get your land entitlements and your users, right? And we know that these are our two big areas of scarcity. Right now, EVs are, we're in early adoption phase. This isn't something that is necessarily readily available to people. They're looking to see if this is something that works for them. But that land entitlement, that's critical. There is no new land. If you are a landowner, you are almost certainly getting approached, depending on your geographic location and the face of your business, by charging companies. And they're approaching and they're saying, hey, I would like to put chargers on your property. And that contract can look many different ways. And a lot of the times the person that has that business doesn't really understand all of this. What all this really translates into is the more entities that you have, the more people that are part of this stream, which means your ROI, if you're spending money on this, is, how many hands can you have in a cookie jar? You're not going to get a cookie. You're going to get some crumbs. But if you are a landowner yourself and you're thinking about, I want to put chargers on my location, what does that do to your property? Is this something that is something that's going to increase the value? Is it something that's going to decrease the value? Is this an asset, a liability? What's the longevity of this? What is the maintenance capabilities of this? Is there somebody locally that can take care of this charger that I'm putting on my property? Because the companies out in California and the manufacturers in the center of the country, and the person that does the software is in a different part of the country, but I'm in the other part of the country. But it's cheap. It's cheap, and I don't have to pay for the installation, so we think it'll be all right, right? Lots to think about here. And once again, going back to this overarching conversation that we're all having here, good data, clean data is so critical, because any decision that you're making inside of this ecosystem has by and large, there's a large dollar component to this. And depending on what you're doing, you're going to have a long investment in your community, and you are building the infrastructure to this country. And if the infrastructure looks like what we have right outside the bounds of our city, which is a single charge point charger in a public grocery store that might as well be a library deposit bin, it doesn't breed confidence. So where's the government in all this? Where is this regulation? Where is this oversight? Most of those conversations begin and end with our charging ports, the plugs rather. And does the government need to get involved in this conversation? No, they don't need to yet. Right now, we've got free market competition. There's conversations of certain plugs combining with each other. Some of the plugs you have never seen before, and you never will again. And that's a good thing. You know, we need these things to happen. Another conversation is if these chargers are going to be OEM restrictive or if they're going to have neutral charging. Everybody wants to be in this conversation of being a smart city, of being forward thinking. There are some cities that have been approached where it is a single banner. And when we say banner, like in Troy, all those chargers are under one banner. It's one company. This can be problematic, and it's problematic because if you have one company that is putting all the chargers in one location, especially with a municipality, you lose that negotiation foothold. You lose the ability to say what's going to go on in your community because you have this partner that has longstanding contracts, that has a lot of money invested in the infrastructure, and more than likely your option is either going to be deal with it, make the best of it, or you're going to have a significantly large investment to either, have a sister network next to it or to remove and rebuild, and you don't even want to be in that conversation. But once again, every single player in this conversation doesn't exist in a vacuum. Between an OEM developing products, when Toyota comes out with their new EV vehicle, it's going to have to be charged. And that relationship between the vehicle and a charger, the customer and the vehicle, the customer and the charger, the billing component, you have all these new intersecting lines that create this web of interconnectivity where, security is a conversation that we've had. Your data is going to be all over the place here. Where is that security? A lot of people like to throw around blockchain, and that, is there a future there for this? Probably in the transactions, but when it comes to how we're building this ecosystem, I think that the conversation that should be behind everybody's mind, and it's a very difficult conversation because we're all looking out for our companies, we're all looking out for our investments, but if we don't do this, and when I say we, it's because people like you who are in this room are the ones that are forward thinking, that are making these decisions today that are going to affect the next 3 to 5 years, which have a huge impact on the next 10. If we're not making good decisions, where we're thinking about all these other players and how they affect our business, how they affect our customers, how they affect our investments, that government is going to get closer and closer. And the last thing that you want to have is somebody who has arguably the least, how do you say this nicely, the least skin in the game, the lowest hanging fruit, the least qualified individual making decisions for you and your community. It's critical that, are they going to get involved? Almost certainly. Almost certainly they're going to get involved for certain reasons. But if we can push that off as far as possible and build this robust infrastructure, we're going to be better off. And there's necessary components to doing that. These are pillars for us as a company. Education. We need an educated group of individuals that are speaking of these things, that are working in these companies. It's very difficult when you are in conversation with prospective partners where the person that is the head of their EV division is somebody that has never worked in EV, doesn't know charging, doesn't know infrastructure. They're a very smart person, they've got accolades, but that transfer over doesn't really line up. So we've got to have good information for people, and then obviously down the stream, we need to have education for the people that are servicing and maintaining and working, on the minutia of all this. As far as customer advocacy, I like to think of who's the most innocent, and it's that old lady paying for her groceries in front of you with a check. God forbid that woman's car breaks down and she has to get an electric vehicle. God help her, She trying to communicate with her how to pay with her phone or her card or however it's going to be, and you got to charge the vehicle. We need to have our customers in our minds constantly, because if we're not servicing them to the best of our ability, we're not building the best products here. Another thing is there has to be integrity in this system. Just like with our gas stations, where that there's somebody going around making sure that when you're told that you paid for a gallon of gasoline, you're getting a gallon of gasoline. We need to have these systems in place. And then safety. Safety is huge, and we can talk about this from a software component, which a lot of people have today, but then there's the hardware component. We talk with fire departments, we talk with the municipalities, and by and large, our first responders don't know really how to deal with these vehicles. OEMs will say, in case of an accident with a battery electric vehicle, first responders should follow that vehicle to the repair facility, just in case, because you don't know if there's going to be this reignition or first ignition of the vehicle. There's very little information on that for these groups. Another thing is having open air burn spaces. When you go to a charger, you will not find at any charger any sort of fire suppression system. Not that any one that we have currently is going to do anything. It's a level 3 fire. You can dunk the car in some kind of electrolyte water, which was done overseas, or you can launch a swimming pool at it. I got the 2-minute mark, so I'm going to try and wrap this up very quickly. We have in our ecosystem dealerships. Dealerships are amazing, and they're amazing because every single conversation that you can have transpires at this real estate. You're looking at a business that has to build a charging infrastructure because the vehicles on their lot are going to be all electric. They are going to have local battery storage. If they're really forward-thinking, they'll be in the conversation of generation as well. They're going to have to manage that fleet. You're going to not only have to service your customers' vehicles, which are going to be coming and going, but you're also going to want to have to be able to service the infrastructure that you currently have at this location. Your people on site need to have specialized training. Why they wouldn't also have training in this infrastructure? They should. This is a no-brainer here. You've got to have your strategic planning for future growth. Yesterday, Kyle asked a question about adding chargers to an F&I package, which if all of your customers are, maybe not all of them, but if a large portion of them are homeowners, you're going to want to, why would you give that to a third-party entity? Audi tells people, go on Amazon. You want to have somebody physically at your location that's going to do that. That's going to say, well, you want to get this new electric vehicle. Let's go to your home. Let's look and see what you have at your infrastructure. Let's see what it's going to be, what's going to work with you, and then build that into the deal. You don't want to lose those dollars. Dealerships are cool. They're super cool. You can look at them as either the canary in the coal mine. I'd hate to look at them in the future and liken them to a Blockbuster Video, which is, I have no problem having that conversation. But this is the future of our infrastructure in one location that everybody here on one way or another touches. And be very mindful of what's going on at these. There's a way for these to survive, and there's a way for these to be major hubs in communities. Because if they don't do it, somebody else is going to. Thank you. Questions? Yep.
Just a real quick one. Most manufacturers of electric vehicles, the chargers, are they standardized as an industry, or just like an Apple with every model you have a different charger in your cell phone and you can cross it for a while?
Yeah, so there's no standardization. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing. We can have a very in-depth conversation as to why that is. Everybody has their own IP. Everybody's trying to figure out what works best for them. Volkswagen isn't going to stop what they're doing and say, what's Ford doing next door? I want to make sure that my customer that owns both vehicles can charge with our product or their product, and the software is going to communicate with the both of them. And in those cases, you're really not going to see a lot of issues because they're going to be few and far between for the most part in our first stages of this adoption. Where you're going to first start seeing issues is fleets, where maybe a fleet has a group of vans and they have a group of larger vehicles. And as you're building this infrastructure, you're realizing, well, I can't use the same company for both of these vehicles. I have to have two separate charging companies. I have to have two separate software packages. And then you start looking at, okay, well, how do I deal with the accounting of this? How do I manage this? This charger doesn't work. Who's the company that who's the third party in there? So there's a lot of levels to this conversation. I hope I answered that well for you. Okay.
Because if I want a Tesla, if I'm going to get another EV car, I don't really think twice if I want to buy another Tesla or something else.
Yeah, Tesla's very, very smart with how they've run their business because they haven't run it like a OEM dealerships. Dealerships have a huge problem because they are franchised, and everybody in your downstream is competing with everybody else. Whereas with Tesla, they're like Apple. Why would they sublet out work to another party? You don't want that. You want streamlined. You want to have as much contact to that stream as possible, not just for security reasons, not just for ease of business, but for branding, for the same reason why the words are coming out of your mouth. Tesla's simple. I know what I'm getting involved with. I know the product. I know the branding. It's like your iPhone.
You're right, because it's unusual because I don't even own a Tesla. But that's the example that comes in my mind. So the branding is there.
Yeah. Very good question. Well, thank you very much for having me.